You are listening to 91.7 FM, WSUW, in Whitewater, Wisconsin. You're listening to Rashkin Report. You're listening to 91.7 FM, The Edge, WSUW in Whitewater, Wisconsin. And today we are talking about a historic meeting between Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill in Cuba and Pope Francis, which is going to happen Friday, February 12th. And joining me to discuss this is Konstantin von Eggert, Russian journalist and political commentator. Konstantin, how are you?
Fine, hello.
Why do you consider this to be such a substantial meeting?
Well, not only I consider that. It's the first meeting between the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, the Patriarch, and the Pope, or a Pope for that matter, in history. So for both Orthodox and Catholics, that's very important because actually in terms of dogma, doctrine, and perception of self, the two churches are, I would say, quite close, and that is in spite of differences over the role of the Pope or the Bishop of Rome and the recognition of sacraments and a lot of other things which seem to be different, but in fact a lot unites Catholics and Orthodox rather than divides them. And I think that this meeting could, I'm not say it will, but I'd say it could open way for a rapprochement between the world of Orthodoxy and the world of Catholicism, and that, of course, will be a milestone for world Christianity, especially because the so-called Great Schism, or the split between, or the split of Christianity into Western and Eastern part in 1054, which is nearly 1,000 years ago, was a very painful one and reverberated through the centuries. So that may be the first and probably quite small step towards healing that.
Now, there will be a meeting in Cuba, and that's interesting because it's neither Rome nor Russia. So there's location. Why do you feel they're meeting there?
I think that whenever the subject of a possible meeting between the Pope and the Patriarch was breached in the last 25 years, it was always clear from the beginning that the meeting will take it was always clear that the meeting will take place in a neutral territory. Because if the Patriarch comes to Rome, then it is as if he's considering himself to be subordinate to the Pope. If the Pope comes to Russia, then it means that it's vice versa. So it was always meant to be in a third country.
All right.
Why Cuba? I think that it is a very peculiar combination of factors that led to that. On the one hand, there is the superficial reason that the paths of both holinesses meet in Latin America in this particular moment. Both are touring the region.
Well, and there,
but there is another reason, I think. For the Patriarch, meeting in Cuba means meeting in a country that is kind of friendly to Russia. So it's not his turf, but it's not Switzerland or something else.
It's a country to which both of them have connections for different reasons.
And of course, for Pope Francis, it is a Spanish part of the Spanish-speaking world. He's been to Cuba, as actually previous popes, and that's his home turf, if you wish. So for both, it's not only a third country, but a place where a certain warmth, a certain special relationship could be claimed.
All right. Now, in the world, there are over 2 billion Christians, according to Pew Research Center and estimates in December 2011, of which over 1 billion are Catholic and 260 million, roughly, are Orthodox Christian. Why do you feel that, Pope Francis is interested in this meeting?
Well, the issue of relationship with Orthodoxy was always very painful and very important for the Catholic Church after the separation of 1054. For the first probably 9 centuries or 9.5 centuries, Rome tried to bring the Orthodox heretics back into the fold, and the Orthodox reacted by basically considering the Catholics to be heretics and deviants from true Christianity, from true traditional Christianity. And this is a split that predated Reformation by nearly 500 years. So the scars of Reformation are painful still, but the scar of separation of what used to be one church until 1054, global Christianity was really global before that. That reverberated through the centuries, because one has to understand church history and church self-perception is very heavily oriented towards tradition, very heavily based on tradition. And church history, church historians always take a very long view, both retrospectively and prospectively. So for the two churches, that was always a very painful moment, and it was always a moment when which provided, or which ignited a debate. Who is a more true Christian, a Catholic or an Orthodox?
So do you see this as Pope Francis perhaps attempted healing the faith?
I think that both have specific, let's say, day-to-day, or you could call it political reasons to go into this meeting. But yes, of course, I think that Pope Francis is very much interested in healing all sorts of intra-Christian rifts. You probably remember that when he was meeting the Patriarch of Constantinople, who until now was the main Orthodox interlocutor of the Catholics, or for the Catholics, he kissed his hand as a gesture of humility. So I think that this is, for Pope Francis, is a logical next step, and for the Patriarch, it is a step which, on the one hand, raises his stature in the eyes of other Orthodox heads of Orthodox churches, of which there are 15 independent churches in the world today, before a very important Congress of heads of the Orthodox churches that will happen in June in Greece, in the island of Crete. And that will be the first such meeting since, trying to figure out, I think since 8th century. So the Patriarch wants to arrive there as someone who is not just heading a church in trouble. The Russian church is in trouble because of Russian-Ukrainian war and the threat of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is notionally part of the Russian church, separating from it. But he will arrive as someone who has his own channel of communication with the Pope, someone who stands right by the side of the Pope as a global leader, and also who fulfills a destiny which the Patriarch always felt it needs to be fulfilled, of putting the Russian Orthodox Church, which is the most numerically strong among the 15 Orthodox churches of the world, at, if you wish, the top of the heap, where its numerical strength will correspond to the level of relations it maintains.
Konstantin, you hit pretty much on the two questions that I was going to ask you next, so I will make a third question out of it. You're saying that this is a new channel for Patriarch and for the Russian Orthodox Church, and you also mentioned that these are not the best times for Russian Orthodox Church because of the conflict with Ukraine. Could this be also called a new channel for Kremlin with the West because of limited number of channels, because of sanctions and everything else?
I think that, let me put it like that, Yuri. I think no one can order the Patriarch to meet the Pope, because it's not just a meeting of an ambassador with a president or a prime minister. It is a meeting which makes history. So, and by the way, which brings also a lot of problems for the Patriarch, because although he's in very, very tight administrative control of the church, large parts of believers and clergy of the Russian church are very much against this meeting, because they still view Catholics as, heretics and agents of America and whatnot, people who want to convert Russia to false faith. And that is a very widespread trend in the Russian church, and I think that the Patriarch understands that. So I don't think that Putin just called the Patriarch and said, "Hey, Your Holiness, could you just figure out how you can meet the Pope in about a month because I'm in big trouble with the West over Ukraine and Syria. It is clear that the Kremlin had an advanced knowledge of this meeting. It is clear that the Patriarch will deliver certain messages, for example, that Russia fights international terrorism in Syria and so on and so forth. But let's be frank. I mean, I don't think that even if the Patriarch repeats that Mr. Putin is fighting for peace in Syria, I don't think that Pope Francis will believe it. Has his own attitude, which probably is not very realistic, is that it all should be solved politically with peace and things like that, but I don't think he will approve of bombing of Aleppo. And another thing which is important is that, as I said, church history has its own pace and its own speed. In 30, 40 years' time, if there is real progress to Christian unity, or at least Orthodox Catholic unity, personal views of Pope Francis, who, for example, to my mind is too left-wing, or personal views of Patriarch Kirill and his story, to my mind, he's too close to the Kremlin, too much linked to the state. In fact, they will be irrelevant if real steps towards Christian unity are achieved in, 20, 30, 40 years. I suppose that is the important level at which I try to look at it. And I also think that having met different popes over the last 15 years, Mr. Putin understands that although this pope is a bit probably more sympathetic to Russia, coming from Latin America and disliking America more than the previous ones, but it's not going to be a game changer for Putin. So I suppose that although there are day-to-day sort of current diplomatic and political elements to that, the meeting is much more important. It is much more than that.
All right. Konstantin von Eggert, just final question. Do you wish you could be there?
Oh, yes, unfortunately I cannot, but I'd love to be there and see it. Although, frankly speaking, as a journalist, I can tell you there's not going to be much to see, but to see the hug, the embrace between the Pope and the Patriarch, that is an image of a lifetime. So, yes, I would like to be there. Unfortunately, I cannot.
Konstantin von Eggert, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
Take care. You're listening to Rashkin Report.